Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here. Thanks for tuning in again. We've got an exciting lineup coming for you in the very near future. We have Peter Schiff and Tom Woods in the queue, so please stick around. Lots of great content to come. And today we have on the line Justin O'Connell from GoldSilverBitcoin. Justin, how are you?
Doing very well, Sean. How about you?
Well, I'm doing very well too. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of your website.
Well, I'm a big fan of yours. We post all of your stuff, and today we're going to get a gold and silver precious metals update. We're also going to talk to you about the vaunted and daunted and much maligned and sometimes loved Bitcoin, mostly loved by a bunch of folks out there, including Max Kaiser and Jeff Berwick. By the way, guys, Justin also writes for Jeff Berwick's Dollar Vigilante. Justin, why don't you tell us what's going on at Gold Silver Bitcoin and give us a bit of a precious metals update?
I have been writing for many years now. I studied history in college and German as well. And studying history in college really gave me a unique perspective on the now. Of course, when 2008 happened, the banking collapse, I had seen a documentary titled Esoteric Agenda. So I had some ideas in the back of my mind. And then I read and reported on a local radio show that I was doing for the college called Question the Official Story with a good buddy of mine on the $700 million bailout at that time. And it's hard to think of that number, 700 million at this time, not because it's so big, but because it seems so small in the amount of money we've seen thrown around wantonly since '08. So I started researching these topics and have worked in the precious metals industry for a number of years. I've written at numerous blogs, Silver Vigilante, Dollar Vigilante, of course, with Jeff Berwick, and Gold Silver Bitcoin. I've also written a book recently, Bitcoinomics, that's going to be coming out, and we're going to be crowd sourcing the editing as well as the profit sharing. So people will be able to edit that on our website, and then we'll edit it once more and release it. And Gold Silver Bitcoin, I believe in all three of those. I think that it's a sound portfolio to have. I've termed it the Rebels portfolio. Although I do think that it's always important to diversify. Sarcastically, in some of the talks I've given, I've commented that if I wanted to make real money, I would probably invest in CCA, which of course is Correction Corps of America. But right. There is an ethical problem with that, I think.
The prison industrial complex, what they've done, folks, is privatized our prisons. And now these prisons have a vested interest in incarcerating nonviolent offenders, marijuana smokers, your kids, should they get in a little bit of trouble. It's very profitable for the prison industrial complex to keep people in prison. I guess, Justin, that's why our nation has, I think, double the number of prisoners in this country as China, and yet we have a third the population. It's all quite disgusting. That's just an aside. Hey, Justin, I think I'd be remiss not to ask you about the Federal Reserve. I asked you for a precious metals update, and I think before you give us your thoughts on where we're headed in the price of silver and gold, we should talk about the fact that the Federal Reserve earlier this week basically announced $85 billion per month and will continue going into the hands of the international and domestic banking cartel. What do you make of that announcement, and what do you think about silver being stuck down here in the 20s for so darn long? It's been my belief for a long time that the growth in price we've seen in Bitcoin is exactly what the holders of physical silver should have experienced, but we haven't yet.
I wasn't surprised by the announcement by the Federal Reserve. I didn't think any major changes were going to be made. And I also wasn't surprised, although gold was up early in trading, it did drop pretty quickly right upon the announcement, $10, $15. And I think that's just the result of uber low sentiment across the board from everyone I talked to within the space. I think coin shops across the country are experiencing a drag in sales. If any of them were holding inventory, the $22 silver has really killed them. We saw this in '08 as well, when the price of silver dropped from about $21 to $9. I've heard coin shops that were not selling monster boxes of silver eagles, for example, because they didn't want to take the $10 hit per coin. So when you're dealing with a product that traditionally the margins are very low on bullion, 1 to 3% tops at a lot of these places, but also hold higher dollar amounts, $22 or $1,500, and then also, of course, the industrial metals. There's a lot of risk in that. So we've seen the soft prices of metals over the last 2 years, really, since silver peaked at 50 and then gold at 1920. This both happened in 2011, silver in the spring and gold in the fall. I think CoinShop, the hurt that coin shops have had to bear is really the main story here. I think we've seen many mergers and consolidations within the precious metals market lately. Elementals Capital purchased Provident, for example. They also own a stake in DGSC, which is a Dallas-based gold and silver exchange, handling jewelry and also bullion and rare coins. So they're traded publicly, and their stock has taken quite a hit since Elemental purchased that company. So I think that's a symptom perhaps of a consolidation that's taking place within the precious metals industry, which is of note, and something that I think that the internet can help persuade by moving us towards a more peer-to-peer market as much as we can within the precious metal space, as well as any other private money spaces or independent money spaces. So I'm not surprised that we're seeing continued bearishness, John, to answer your question. I think that, of course, there's a great case to be made for gold and silver manipulation. If you want to tune to mainstream media, of course, you cannot undermine the importance of the bearish sentiment all around. And the mainstream press loves harping on the gold price first thing. Of course, the Fed announcement happened, and the first thing that CNBC turned to was the gold price and its bearishness. And I think that's important because that just really hammers in at those people who are watching CNBC every single day, their head that the gold price is weak and not a safe haven.
Yeah, well, CNBC really strikes most of us at this point of being a propaganda arm of the Federal Reserve and the U.S. Treasury and the big banks. Well, Justin, you mentioned sentiment, and just getting back to that real quickly, I think you're right. I've been speaking at length with Andy Hoffman about this. Sales are down for a lot of these precious metals dealers. You'd think Americans would be waking up, but as the stock market just reaches new highs, it's helped really put people to sleep and keep them asleep. So there isn't a lot of interest maybe in precious metals, although then we look at news coming out of Goldcore and Silver Doctors and others saying that Silver Eagle bullion coin sales are heading for an annual record of over 40 million ounces this year. So somebody's buying this stuff up, Justin. And the question is, when the final shoe drops and when the collapse comes, how many Americans are going to be left holding no tangible assets? And I think the answer is an awful lot of them, don't you?
I do. We've seen great examples of private money, especially in the wake of the banking collapse. German towns are printing their own currency and using them, but that's paper nonetheless. It's not gold and silver. Gold and silver has a long history of being valued in this world, and I think it's important to note also that silver's had a war that's been waged against it for, you could argue, within this nation's history since the beginning, but especially in 1873 with the crime of 1873, in which silver was demonetized, basically neutralizing the savings of millions of farmers. And you can't make a mistake about it. That is a war against silver.
That's right. It's also a war against humanity. And I've been saying that a long time, Justin, that this is, at this point, it is humanity versus the banksters, humanity versus the criminal banking cartel. We see that in Greece. We see that in Detroit. We see that in Cyprus. We see it all over the planet. We saw it in Iceland. Fortunately, Icelanders had the wherewithal and the moral fortitude to fight back, and they kicked the banksters out. They arrested some of them, had trials. It's what we need to do in this country. But getting back to the idea of diversification, the name of your website is GoldSilverBitcoin. Let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin. As I've said before, Justin, I really truly feel in my heart of hearts that people that own physical silver ought to have enjoyed the run that people have enjoyed who own Bitcoin, meaning those that got in at Bitcoin below 10 and now Bitcoin's up in, 160, 180, 200? So the Max Kaisers of the world, the Jeff Berwicks of the world, they've all been right.
Mm-hmm. Trace Mayer as well, who started recommending on his blog Run to Gold at 5 cent Bitcoin to purchase it. That's one of the calls of a decade. Eric Sproul, of course, has called silver the investment of a lifetime, and sometimes I think perhaps Bitcoin is the investment of our lifetime. It's interesting because very diverse personalities have commented on Bitcoin, from Bill Gates to Al Gore, and as you stated, Max Kaiser and Jeff Berwick.
And if I may, I just want to interrupt too, because I want to be very clear about this. I don't own any Bitcoin, nor is this a call about encouraging others to buy Bitcoin. I just want to get your take on it because Bitcoin has had such an extraordinary run, and guys like Max Kaiser who've been maligned for, I guess, quote unquote, supporting Bitcoin, but really what he's supporting is just the idea of competing currencies that are not under the control of the criminal international banking cartel. Max has been right. So anybody who took his advice at 10 or 12 or 20, on Bitcoin has done extraordinarily well, Justin. And that's just the point I wanted to make, because although I'm not a Bitcoin guy, and I do have a very important article I want to ask you about here, where the feds confiscated a record $29 million in Bitcoins from the Dread Pirate hard drive. I want to ask you about that, and I want to ask you about the encryption problems. Is Bitcoin safe? But to circle back, you're right. A lot of people have trumpeted Bitcoin as the way to divest out of the dollar, and those people up to this point, as long as your Bitcoins haven't been seized, those people have been right.
Atlas, who is a early miner in the Bitcoin community, made a statement on the Bitcoin Talk forum. It went something like this: "Gentlemen, I think we're the new elite." And there's a lot of truth to what he said. Bitcoin has made a lot of independent people, creative thinkers, very wealthy over the last 5 years. And you can't say that about gold, silver, and the other precious metals. What you can say about the other about precious metals is that they're tangible assets. They're great as a hedge against the internet itself, which is not tangible in the same respects as gold and silver is. Mm-hmm. And it's just something completely different. Obviously, you stated that Max Kaiser has trumpeted that diversification is key, and that's really the key to Bitcoin. You can have your gold and silver. There's gold, silver, and Bitcoin are not at odds with each other. They're actually part of a healthy portfolio that people can use and make money off of. I think that they are alternative assets, and that's what really makes them relatable. I've been looking into making a motif at motifinvesting.com, where you can come up with a motif of investments, typically stocks, and put them under one motif. And my motif was gold, silver, and Bitcoin, because I think that they are related in many ways.
Well, Justin, I have a question for you. I think it's a very important question, given the fact that we've allowed Bitcoin to be brought up in this conversation, probably turning a lot of listeners off. I did a video several years ago called The Silver Perspective. Silver had run from probably about 12, 14, 21, 22, and the video was about the advantages of purchasing this very precious tangible asset, physical silver. And the question I posed was, at 21, is silver still a buy? Now, silver then went up to 48 before pulling all the way back down to these low 20s. And I maintained then that it was a screaming value and a buy at 21. I maintain that it still is today. So my question to you, Justin, is with Bitcoin hovering well past what, 150? What is Bitcoin priced at today?
Right now it's $200. It started the year off around $9. It shot up to $266 on April 15th before falling all the way down to $60.
Okay. But here's my question. I just needed to know the price. So at $200 per Bitcoin, if I made the argument in the silver perspective that silver was a buy at 21, and I believe it's still a buy today in the low 20s, probably even a bigger, more screaming value today at 23 and 22 and change, 23. Is Bitcoin, in your estimation, a buy at 200?
Well, I'm not a certified financial advisor. I haven't licensed it. Yes, I do believe that it is a buy. I think that how easy it is to transfer money gives it innate value, and that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins ever in existence. Many of those have already been lost because people forget their password. That it's a rare asset.
Well, you're right. At least they can't print them in perpetuity like the Federal Reserve does. Some Bitcoin advocates out there, like Cliff High with the WebBots project. Cliff, I don't believe even owns any Bitcoins, or for the longest time he didn't. Maybe he's gotten some through donations. I know he takes donations in the form of Bitcoin now, but Cliff has made the argument that Bitcoin could go 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. It could go much, much higher based on inflation, based on the fact that the total number of Bitcoins is capped. So I just wanted to get that on the record with you and get your opinion on Bitcoin at $200 each. To me, and I think a lot of folks listening, Justin, folks listening are probably thinking they would much rather have 9 or 10 ounces of physical silver, though, for that same $200. What's your take on that?
I think that it's important to diversify, so we're talking about not too much money. I think that both Bitcoin and silver are great values. At the beginning of this year, Bitcoin was very cheap relative to silver. You needed maybe 3 Bitcoins in order to buy an ounce of silver. Today, it takes 10 ounces of silver to buy 1 Bitcoin. But really what I want to harp is that Bitcoin and silver are not at odds. I can't really make any predictions about what's going to happen to the price. I do know that the demand for Bitcoin in China is overwhelming, just as it is for gold and silver. I know that, I think at least, that the demand for Bitcoin in the US is much greater than it is for silver. And so it's a very easy sell, especially to the younger generation. And so when you're trying to promote liberty, it's much cooler to bring up at a party Bitcoin than, say, silver. And you can get people captivated in a technological discussion or even a financial discussion. And increasingly, I noticed that conversations go to the Federal Reserve because people are understanding that a centralized banking system doesn't make much sense in this day and age.
It strikes me as a little sad that people would be so enthusiastic to discuss Bitcoin at a cocktail party and not enthusiastic to discuss a tangible, precious asset like physical silver, which has been money for 2, 3, 4, 5,000 years. I guess it speaks to the culture, it speaks to the culture we're in as much as anything. But what do you think about the argument that Bitcoin may just be a creation of one of these agencies? You could probably briefly explain the history of that better than I, but what do you make of that argument and people's distrust of Bitcoin in that it may have been created by one of these agencies, NSA, CIA type of thing?
It's quite a Shakespearean story, the beginnings of Bitcoin. Satoshi Nakamoto, apparently a one-off computer designer and mathematician, designs a protocol which allows one to transfer what's really a tangible asset backed by cryptographic mathematics instantly across the world. Some people have contentions with that story. You can analyze his English and come to various conclusions. It's accepted in academia that Shakespeare was not one man, but a round table. Some people suggest that he was Francis Bacon. So perhaps the same is true of Satoshi Nakamoto. It's tough to know. As far as it being a design or a technique of any federal government or transnational corporation run by so-called demise of the state globalist, that's also difficult to know. But what I will say is that I do believe that there is a such thing on this planet still of spontaneous order. And Rothbard spoke much about spontaneous order. He wrote about it. He traced it back in philosophy to Zhuangzi in China in about the 20th century BC, I want to say. And he suggests that although things do seem to be so tightly controlled, that there are flowers in the concrete and that things do pop up out of nowhere. And Bitcoin could be a great example of this. It's at least given people the imagination, the ability to imagine a monetary system outside of the centralized, globalized system that we are currently under. It also allows people to think of moving things in a peer-to-peer manner, which is, I think, an umbrella under which Bitcoin falls. It's really a descendant of the peer-to-peer technologies, of course, popularized by Napster in 2001. And that is where I think a lot of its value, that is Bitcoin, lies, in its peer-to-peer nature.
Well, Justin, it's been a really bad couple of years for those of us that know, understand, and appreciate the physical precious metals story. Ultimately, what we can do is continue to embrace the real story, the real truth, follow the real news, know that the Fed is just going to continue printing in perpetuity until they destroy this currency known as the US dollar once and for all. In the meantime, folks, you can do a little bit of reading about Bitcoin over at GoldSilverBitcoin, or you can wait until, or you can read Justin's book, Bitcoinomics, which, Justin, remind us, when is that being released?
Bitcoinomics will be released starting next week. Its website will be bitcoinomics.net. You can go there and read it. I'll be releasing 2 chapters a week, and you can even edit it and have a say. I'm trying to get a lot of dissenting voices to the Bitcoin movement as well, because I by no means want to exclude any of the important thinkers of our day.
Okay, so your book is, you're kind of taking that Wikipedia approach to your book, huh?
I'm going to take the Wikipedia approach to the book, and then it's going to be edited. It's going to be a textbook, and there's going to be an abridged version that's meant for popular digestion.
Well, cool. I mean, you know what, guys? There's no way that all of us will ever agree on Bitcoin for or against it. But again, I just want to say in defense of guys like Max Keiser and others, Mike Krieger over at Liberty Blitzkrieg is also a big advocate of Bitcoin. And, all you can do when you're intellectually honest is give credit where credit's due, those that have been right. We all stood a chance to make a lot of money on Bitcoin had we heeded the advice of guys like Justin O'Connell, Mike Krieger, Max Keiser, etc., etc. Justin, remind people where they can find you on the interwebs, will you?
GoldSilverBitcoin.com is a shop I run. I'm the administrator there. You can buy gold, silver for money like Federal Reserve notes or Bitcoin. Also, Bitcoinomics.net, where you can read the book I've written.
Well, we do appreciate your time, Justin. It was good to finally connect with you.
My pleasure, Sean.
Guys, thanks for tuning in, and please do check out sgtreport.com and thelibertymill.com, where you can find real news, truthful news 24/7. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks for watching. Have a good night.